Hallo Studentin, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and in this series, Learning the German Language, the Essential Beginner's Guide, we're not going to go through lists of Zahlen, Farben, Obst, Gemüse, Jahreszeiten, Monate. I'm not going to hand you proverbial fish. I want you to learn how to fish. I want you to learn how to learn the German language in the most efficient and effective ways possible. I've been teaching German for 15 years to students of all ages, all backgrounds, but there's been a common theme. They focus on building vocabulary for weeks, months, maybe years, finally travel to a German-speaking country, and they're so excited to put all of that vocabulary to use. But then they make the painful discovery that they don't have the tools to actually string those words together into sentences. Where did these students go wrong? Well, most of them are native English speakers who don't have experience learning foreign languages, so they simply followed popular advice for how to go about learning German. So using popular apps, software programs, watching YouTube videos, but all of these resources, if not used correctly, will keep students relegated to what I call passive and active learning. These are low efficiency and mid-efficiency ranges of learning. And if you really want to learn to speak German, that's not where you want to be. You need to be in this green zone of high efficiency applied learning. And in this series, I'm going to show you what it is about passive learning, what it is about active learning that keeps you from achieving your goal, how you can take the same resources, the YouTube videos, the apps, the software programs, but use them differently so that you are in this zone of applied learning. After we examine those three types of learning, we're also going to look at common questions that beginners have as they start learning the German language. Does the instant immersion method really work? Should I start speaking German right away? How fast can I learn German? Is translating good or bad? What's the best way to get started? Even if you've already been learning the German language for weeks, months, years, this series is still for you because you've most likely fallen into the common pitfalls of merely passive or active learning. If you are a complete beginner, that's extra fantastic because this series will help you save time and wasted effort when it comes to learning the German language. Okay, I know you are eager to get into the meat of this series. That starts at about a half hour in. If you want to, skip ahead, check that out. Verify that this series is for you like I say it is, but then come back to this point. You need this first half hour of information as well. It is not enough to learn what to do. You have to also learn what not to do, what to stop doing, so that you can learn to speak the German language in the best, fastest ways possible. In the next video, we're going to dive into the details of what does passive, low-efficiency learning look like and how can you avoid making those mistakes. The first type of learning that we need to avoid because it is not going to help us achieve our goal of speaking German is merely passive learning. This is low efficiency learning where sure, it's not a complete waste of time, but if we take that same amount of time and use it differently, use it more wisely, you can learn so much more and you can learn it better and you can learn it faster. So what does low efficiency passive learning look like? It looks like sitting back, watching a lot of YouTube videos, nodding along, video after video, maybe doing something else in the background. I know that you have the best of intentions. I know that you really want to learn. I also know that there are a lot of options out there and it's overwhelming to know where to start. This seemed like an easy way to at least do something. Okay, I get it. We are going to look at a little bit later how you can still use YouTube videos and learn with them, but just sitting back and watching them hour after hour, that is not going to help you speak German. There are two main pitfalls of working with YouTube videos. We need to be aware of them so we can avoid them. The first problem is that generally speaking, all of the phrases and vocabulary lists are presented as isolated vocabulary words, like this. Okay, say you're watching a video learning items around the living room, and on the list you learn Tisch for table, couch, which is obvious, and Kissen, which means pillow. But this isn't enough information. You're not going to have a conversation with a German and point around the room demonstrating that you know how to say Tisch, couch, Kissen. You need more information in order to use this vocabulary. The first bit of information that is not optional, you must know this, is you have to know the gender of each of these nouns. Okay, this is a mind-blowing concept for us English speakers, but in German, there are 3 genders. Every noun will have one of 3 genders, masculine, feminine, or neuter, and here we have an example of each one. So Tisch, table, is a masculine noun, and we would learn this by putting the word der in front of it and learning specifically der Tisch. That's to help us remember that Tisch is a masculine noun because of that der in front of it. And then in front of couch, we would learn the word die. And that flags to us that couch is a feminine noun. Finally, the word das in front of Kissen would tell us this is a neuter noun. So der, die, das are all 3 different ways of saying the word the. Okay, they all mean the. It's just a masculine way of saying the, a feminine way of saying the, and a neuter way of saying the. I know, again, feels a little complicated, but it's absolutely essential. Now, I know there are lots of YouTube lists that give you this information, and that is great, but it's still not quite enough. You have to be able, with every new word that you learn, you have to be able to plug it in to a complete sentence right away. You have to be able to practically use it in some way. For example, we need to be able to say der Tisch ist, which means is, and then some sort of adjective, such as neu. Der Tisch ist neu, the table is new. Okay? Or with couch, to say die Couch ist blau. The couch is blue. Okay? Or with Kissen, to be able to say das Kissen ist weich. It is soft. In a little bit, I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step process so that you can write these short, simple sentences yourself, so that you can find, lists of vocabulary anywhere, but actually be able to interact with them, apply that knowledge so that it will support you in achieving your goal of speaking German. But before we can get into those details, we still need to look at the second pitfall of working with just isolated vocabulary lists. The second pitfall of working with isolated vocabulary lists is that some vocabulary is irrelevant to you and your life, and only you can make this decision. No one on YouTube can do this for you. There are 2 types of irrelevant vocabulary to be on the watch for. Firstly, we can have straight up wrong vocabulary, as in, if you don't talk about cars, then don't learn a lot of German vocabulary about cars. If you don't talk about music, scales, arpeggios, chords, D minor versus D major, etc., you don't need to learn that vocabulary in German either. You learn vocabulary that you are going to use. That might seem obvious, but the second type of irrelevant vocabulary trips up a lot of people. people. And that's learning good, useful vocabulary that we're all reasonably going to use, but learning it at the wrong time. And the prime example of this type of irrelevant vocabulary is learning the German alphabet. I have heard so many students tell me that they think, oh, I need to learn the German alphabet first. One of the first things I should learn is the German alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is nonsense. You're not going to have a conversation with a German, introduce yourself, and proceed to spell out your name. Okay, you have to always think about the scenarios in which you would use given vocabulary. And if you don't have all of the German that goes with that situation, then you're learning that vocabulary at the wrong time, right? So for example, you need to be able to spell things out if you're on the phone making a hotel reservation or buying tickets for a concert, right? But until you're ready to do that, you probably don't need to know the German alphabet. You can continue working with YouTube videos of vocabulary lists, but you can take that passive learning and transform it into high efficiency learning by simply interacting with those lists differently, like you got a glimpse of when we took Tisch, couch, and kissen and made complete sentences with them. I'm going to walk you through step by step the process of knowing how to do that on your own. But before we can talk about that, we need to address the mid-efficiency learning, which is exactly where most students are. If you are working with a popular app or a software program, then this is your category. And again, we can take those same resources, but transform how we interact with them and be in the high efficiency zone where you will learn to speak German in the best, fastest ways possible. Maybe you've fallen into that trap of the low efficiency, passive learning, working on irrelevant, isolated vocabulary. Maybe you'd already recognized the error of your ways and tried to upgrade to a better type of learning, which is called active learning and is the subject of this video. Active learning is middle efficiency level learning. Okay, it has some good aspects to it, but again, some pitfalls that you need to be aware of so that you can avoid them, so that you can be at this highest level efficiency learning, which will be the subject of the next video. But first, what does active learning look like? Many students who are at this middle range active learning level are working with popular apps where you are identifying words, matching them up, unscrambling them. It's going to look something like this. You might have German words such as Frau, Junge, Mädchen, and you click on them to reveal the English translations. That Frau means woman, Junge means boy, Mädchen means girl, okay? Then you interact with this information again by doing a matching exercise, where now you have to pair up Frau with its English translation, Junge with its English translation, Mädchen with its English translation. Then you get to these unscrambling activities, where you have a complete sentence, but it's all in a mixed up order, and you have to click on the words in the right order in order to say, I am a girl and you are a woman. Ich bin ein Mädchen und du bist eine Frau. Active learning is attractive because it's fun to earn stars or hearts or diamonds or whatever. It's satisfying to learn German every day for a certain amount of time, or have an unbroken streak, or be able to level up through all of these stages in the program. But it's also deceptive because activity doesn't equal productivity. Many times it amounts to nothing more than busy work. I know that might sound a little offensive. I'm not saying it's nothing, but hear me out because I'm trying to help. It's just like with the YouTube list scenarios. It's not inherently bad. It's not inherently wrong, but passive learning, right? It's low efficiency. It's low effectiveness. And active learning, it has its upsides, but it's still not quite where you need to be. If all you want to know how to do is recognize German vocabulary, essentially be able to read in German, then active learning is probably enough for you. But if your goal is to speak German, then this active style learning isn't going to take you there because it's not setting you up to produce your own German, right? It sets you up to recognize German, but not to create your own German utterances. That happens only in this next category of learning, which we'll be talking about soon. So what is it about active learning that causes it to miss the mark, where it falls short? The first problem with active learning is that it relies very heavily on translating. Now, there are specific scenarios in which translation is necessary, and that's fine. But as a general principle, it's to be avoided. Why? It's going to slow you down, gum up the gears. It's a crutch. You're going to be dependent on it, and you'll never be able to speak German any faster than you can translate in your head, which is pretty difficult to do in the middle of a conversation. So think about it like this, okay? We have a triangle. The goal is the German word. There are two different ways to get there. There's the smart way, and then there's the longer, harder way, okay? So back up, how does this work with our native language? Without us consciously realizing this, okay, when we were learning English, we're thinking in images, sensations, and we were directly connecting that to the English word. Okay, so for example, we would envision, right, with our mind's eye, a table, okay, and we have the whole idea of a table, what a table looks like, how we use a table, right, the concept of a table, and we attached that to the English word table, okay? So now you can do the same thing with German, and that's what you want to do. You want to envision, right, the concept of the word you're trying to learn and connect it directly to the German word, which in this instance is Tisch, okay? But what a lot of people do wrong with this active learning, right, the mid-level efficiency active learning, is that they go from the English word, right, table, to the German word Tisch, but underneath the surface, there's this whole other step there, right? Where they're still starting with the concept on a subconscious level, but then feeding it through English to get to German, as opposed to the desired route of directly from the concept to the word. So now we've already covered the dangers of learning an isolated German word along with its English translation. But the thing is that even learning entire sentences with their English translations is not going to help you, okay? You're not going to learn a sentence like this, Ich sehe den Mann, die Frau und das Baby, and its English translation of I see the man, the woman, and the baby. You're not going to memorize these kind of sentences hoping to have a perfect situation in which to use them when you go to Germany. We don't speak English by parroting memorized phrases, and so you shouldn't be trying to learn German that way either, right? But looking at these sentences gets at the second inherent problem with this mid-level efficiency active learning, and that is that all of the grammar pieces are included for you, but they're not being explained. For example, we have this now familiar sentence, Ich sehe den Mann, die Frau und das Baby. I see the man, the woman, and the baby. Now check out the second sentence, right? To our English brains, the only thing that we're changing is what we're doing. Now we're no longer seeing the man, the woman, and the baby. We are helping them. Ich helfe dem Mann, der Frau und dem Baby. but observe all of the additional changes that are happening in German, right? We have man in both sentences, but the way we're saying the word the in front of man is changing. Here it is den, and here it is dame, right? We have the same situation with the word Frau. It occurs in both sentences. Both times it translates to the woman, and yet here in German it is die Frau, and yet when we're helping her, now it is der Frau. Okay? We have the same problem with baby, right? We see the baby, we help the baby, but the way we're saying the changes from das to dame. So not only is this just further evidence of the dangers of translating, right? They're leaving out a lot of information that you need to know. Just that simple translation is not enough. But again, getting at a second problem here, which is that all of these grammar changes that are just being included for you are not being explained. And you have to understand them if you want to speak German. You have to not only understand them, you have to be able to make these changes yourself. The good news is this is possible with our high level efficiency learning, which is what I call applied learning, and that is the subject of our next video. We've looked at the details of passive learning, active learning, and how the lists on YouTube, unscrambling sentences with popular apps and software programs, they're not inherently bad or wrong. It's how we're interacting with them that makes for low efficiency learning or mid efficiency learning. We can take those same resources and interact with them differently, and that puts us into the green zone of high efficiency applied learning. If you want to learn how to speak German, this is where you need to be. Both passive and active learning focus just on building vocabulary. But this is just half the story, and the other half is grammar. If you don't understand German grammar, you can't string vocabulary together and actually use it. We need to be at this place where vocabulary and grammar overlap, they interact. It doesn't matter if you've been working with thematic vocabulary lists on YouTube or elsewhere, or if you've been matching or unscrambling or even memorizing, complete sentences. The grammar is either missing entirely or it's not being explained, and we have to understand the grammar in order to use it, of course. And it's when we combine vocabulary and grammar that we're in that green zone of high efficiency learning. So I'm going to give you a strategy, a formula for writing these short, simple sentences, which I call sentence drills. You need to be able to take vocabulary regardless of where you're getting it from, a YouTube video or an app software program, whether it's in list form already or it's embedded in an entire sentence and you have to pull it out. You need to take this vocabulary right from the beginning, add on the grammar, and be able to compose complete sentences. We can take those resources from passive and active learning, but transform them into applied learning by doing this intentional interaction with them. That's what makes it high efficiency. That's how you can learn better and you can learn faster. First, we'll look at some examples of different kinds of sentence drills. Then, we'll walk through a few practice examples. And finally, I will show you an optimal way to set up a whole exercise of sentence drills that you can do in rapid-fire fashion. So, let's say that you want to watch a YouTube video on basic fruits and vegetables. The first 3 words that come up are der Apfel, apple, die Banane, banana, and das Gürkchen, little cucumber. So at this point, stop the video. Don't keep watching. You need to intentionally interact with this new vocabulary. You need to apply it by putting it into a sentence drill like these. For each of those isolated vocabulary words, we can then follow up with the word ist, which means simply is. And then after that with an adjective, which notice I'm keeping that the same too. Lecker means delicious. So we have der Apfel ist lecker, die Banane ist lecker, das Gürkchen ist lecker. One at a time, we can change each of these 4 components. So now in these sentences, right, we're always talking about the banana, the banana, the banana, right? And it's delicious, delicious, delicious. And what's changing? The first word is changing. Instead of saying die Banana every time, right, the banana, here we're saying diese Banana, this banana, jede Banana, every banana, and then welche Banana ist lecker, right? Which banana is delicious? We can also change the verb component to our sentence. We can say war for was, ist for is, wird for will be. Or finally, we can change that 4th component, the adjective, and we can say die Banane ist weich, it's soft. Die Banane ist gelb, it's yellow. Die Banane ist süß, it's sweet. So now the exact formula that we're going to look at in this video that I'm going to walk you through is this one. Die kleine Banane ist lecker. Die große Banane ist lecker. Die reife Banane ist lecker. For the small banana is delicious, the big banana is delicious, the ripe banana is delicious. Okay, so I've added in here a second adjective. We have not only the ones at the end of the sentence, but we also have one in between the word the and then the noun itself. So that the formula looks like this. The, and then adjective, whatever noun, the word ist for is, and then another adjective. Okay, so before you stop this video thinking, great, got it, I can do sentence drills now, I'll just use the word for the, and then pick out an adjective, and pick out a noun, and then ist, and then another adjective, got it. No, you don't, because there's more grammar happening here than you might realize at this point. For example, all of these D's mean the, but so does the word der, and then also the word das and den and dem and des. All 6 of these words mean the in German. It's a grammar thing, but you have to understand it. You have to be able to use it correctly in order to speak German. And in the same vein, we have slightly different ways to say all of these adjectives. It's ending with an E here, like this version of the, but we can have our adjectives end with an R or an S or an N or an M as well. And again, there are particular reasons why. There are principles and patterns that dictate which changes we make to which words and when and how, and you ultimately have to know all of this in order to speak German, and the time to start with it is now. And I will show you the most basic place to start. Okay, so now to run through the process of writing your own sentence drills step by step, we're going to work with 3 new words, but they're still basic foods, okay? So we have der Spargel, which means asparagus, die Aubergine, eggplant, and das Radieschen, radish. Every singular noun in German will be either masculine, feminine, or neuter, and I like to color code this information. Okay, der Spargel, red, to indicate it's a masculine noun, die Aubergine, blue, to indicate it's a feminine noun, das Radieschen, green, to indicate that it is a neuter noun. So it is not just superfluous information to know the gender of nouns in German. The gender of the noun is one of the factors that will impact exactly which version of the we're going to use and which version of our adjectives, big and small and ripe and whatever. The gender of the noun, it plays a role in that. So you have to know this. Wherever you are learning German, if you're learning nouns of any kind and the der, die, das is not included, then stop using that resource, okay? There are smarter ways to learn German noun gender, you can click on a link which will open up in a new tab where you can watch a different video that I've already filmed on this topic of how you can learn German noun gender beyond just trying to memorize an isolated der, die, das. Okay, but that's a topic for later. For the sake of this video, we're just going to give you the der, die, das. But do watch the other one, because then you will learn that there are ways to predict whether a noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter. It's not random. It's not just a guessing game, okay? But for now, just given to you, der Spargel, die Aubergine, das Radieschen. So now the most basic sentence drills that you can start writing today are ones that will have your nouns of choice be the subject of the sentence, okay? Play the role of the subject, the person, place, thing, idea, the noun that is taking action of some kind. And whatever role the noun is playing in the sentence, whether it's a subject noun or a different type of noun like the direct object or the indirect object, that is going to connect directly to something that is called the noun's case. Oh boy, so maybe you found yourself going from a nodding, yeah, sure, I get it, this all makes sense, sounds good, to a, oh dear, subject noun, direct object noun, indirect object noun, 5th grade English class, wasn't a good experience, or maybe it was just a long time ago. Okay, it's all right. You're still in the right place, okay? Even if this is the first video you've ever seen about learning German, or you're otherwise a beginner, don't for a moment think that you're getting too in over your head. This is exactly where you need to start. You need to know certain grammar terms, certain grammar concepts as early as possible. I'm going to tell you what those are, giving you a brief overview, right? Then we're going to dive into the details of just a little bit of it, okay? And then you can also click below and register for my free mini course, Unlocking German Grammar, and I go into more detail on these same essential grammar topics in that course. Okay, but circling back, okay, to we're going to take our vocabulary from our thematic list of fruits and vegetables. We're going to take this, create complete sentences like you've already seen, and in each of those sentences, our noun, whether it's asparagus or eggplant or radish, it's going to play the role of subject of the sentence. Okay, so here is a chart, a little table to help us better understand these relationships. Okay, so look at this middle column first. We have a noun that's playing a particular role, such as being the subject of the sentence. What is that noun doing? It's taking action of some kind, okay? We have 3 other possibilities in German for the role that the noun can play, right? So 3 different reasons why it's playing that role, right? Or it describes what's happening. And now look at this part, this whole verbiage of case, which again is a good term to know. We have a particular, very Latin, I think it's Latin, maybe it's Greek, I think it's Latin, name that lines up one for one with the type of role that the noun is playing, okay? So we're going to ignore all of this stuff, okay? This comes later, and we're going to focus just on this first case, this first role that a noun can potentially play, that of being the subject. And if the noun is the subject noun, it's going to go into what is called the nominative case. So why does this matter? Because just like the gender of the noun, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter, just like that piece of the puzzle impacts exactly how we say the and exactly how we say our adjectives, so likewise the role that the noun is playing, and therefore the case that it is in, is also going to impact exactly how we say the and similar words, this, that, my, his, etc., and also how we say our adjectives. So this means that for every German noun that you learn, you need to learn its gender along with it, whether it's masculine with der, feminine with die, neuter with das, but then you also have to know what role it's playing in the given sentence. You have to know whether it's the subject or the direct object or the indirect object, because those two factors are going to impact how we make these tiny changes to the words coming in front of the noun. And I know that that can sound really overwhelming, but we're going to bite off just a little bit of this right now and walk you through it, and that will set the stage for you learning more. Okay, so here in our complete sentences, we have der Spargel ist lecker, and it is red because it's a masculine noun. Die Aubergine, eggplant, is also lecker, and it's blue because it's a feminine noun. Das Radieschen is green to indicate that it's a neuter noun. Now there's another layer of color coding that I think is valuable to do, and that is color coding for the case. So in these sentences, each food here is the subject of the sentence, so that's going to be the nominative case like we just saw in the table on the previous slide. And I like to do that by drawing in what I call a slot. It's this little place for the noun to sit. Okay, and I'm going to color code that pink. That's just what I use for the nominative case. Again, the colors are arbitrary. You can use whatever you want, just be consistent. So in that same nominative slot, we can add in another adjective, right? We looked at this before. So now we're adding in a color each time. Green asparagus, white eggplant, and red radishes. Der grüne Spargel ist lecker. Die weiße Aubergine ist lecker. Das rote Radieschen ist lecker. Okay? And all of that's going to belong together in this pink slot for the nominative case, because each of these nouns is playing the role of the subject of the sentence, right? Taking the action, if you will, of being delicious. Okay? So now we can make our nominative case slots really big by adding in more adjectives. Der große, frische, grüne Spargel, the big, fresh, green asparagus, ist lecker. Die große, frische, weiße Aubergine ist lecker. Das große, frische, rote Radieschen ist lecker, right? Everything with big, fresh, and then its color, and then the noun. Yeah. Okay, so what is happening here? We need to take a step back and try to make some observations of things in these nominative slots that are different and things that are the same. So let's start with some of the things that are different. We have this R, right? That's part of the word der, and that's different. It is about Spargel being masculine, right? Then we have the E as part of the word die. That is what it is in part because Aubergine is a feminine noun. So likewise, we have this S in das. That is what it is in part because Radieschen is a neuter noun. And again, that's just one piece of the puzzle. They're also exactly what they are because of our nominative case slots, because of the role that the nouns are playing. They're all the subject noun in these sentences. Now, the things that are the same are our words große, frische, and then the colors, but they all end with E. And it doesn't matter in this instance what gender the noun has, they still have these identical adjectives. That's interesting, okay? Now we need to look at a chart that is going to help explain these tiny little changes, where they're different and where they're the same. Okay, all of these tiny little changes, just single letter changes, are called declensions. Okay, and we have one chart here that has all the declensions you need. Conventionally, students try to work with 10 or more charts to learn this same topic, but this way is the most efficient way. This is applied learning, okay? So in our examples, we're in the nominative case, right? The subject of the sentence, and then we have a masculine noun, Spargel. So masculine nouns are right here. Okay? Then we have the feminine noun, Aubergine. So that's the next column. And then we have Radieschen, a neuter noun. Okay, so where all of these intersect then is just a small portion of this chart, and that's what we're going to focus on in our examples. We're going to be strictly right here, okay? The rest of the chart, you need it. You need to know all of these declensions and when and how to use them. But in this video, I'm going to walk you through examples with just this portion right here. Okay, so now taking that portion of the chart and our three big sentences, right, with our large nominative slots because we have all of these adjectives, see if you can line up what's happening with the information in the chart. Okay, starting with Spargel, okay, we have an R declension, which lines up right here. And then we have all of these E declensions, which all line up right there. Interesting. Then Aubergine, we have all a bunch of E's, right? This one and all the rest, okay? And to be technical about it, right, the first E would be this one, and then all of the adjective E's would be this one, okay? And then the neuter, right, we see an S and an E in the chart, and that lines up with the S and all of these E's for the adjectives. So the way that we're saying the, right, the is its own type of word, and that's why it's taking its own declension. And then adjectives, right, it doesn't matter how many we have, they're the same type of word, and they're all taking the same declensions as well. Okay, so let's return back to other fruits and vegetables that we looked at earlier in this video, and you can practice putting the declensions on yourself. So we have the word Apfel. It's color-coded red to indicate this is a masculine noun. It is the subject of the sentence, so it goes into what is called the nominative case, which I indicate by drawing what I call a slot, right, for it to go into along with the words in front of it. We're going to say the red apple is delicious, but the word the needs a declension. The adjective red needs a declension. How do we do it? Well, if we reference the chart, right, masculine and then nominative, our options are right here, right? I know there are these interesting little symbols here that we're not talking about right now. Those come down the road. But for what we have talked about, we have two options, the R and the E. So which one are you going to use where? The R needs to go here, so we get the word der, the, and then the E goes on to the adjective. Der rote Apfel ist lecker. So now we can do the same thing with a feminine noun like banana. Again, it's all the subject of the sentence, nominative case then, and it's a feminine noun, and that puts us then right here in the chart, right, or our little snippet of the chart, and both times it's an E, right? So we put an E in that little blank, we put an E in that little blank, and we get Die gelbe Banane ist lecker. Now finally, we have our Gürkchen, also the subject of the sentence, so it also has to be in the nominative case, taking the declensions that are particular to the nominative case for neuter nouns, because Gürkchen is a neuter noun. So we have an S as an option and we have an E as an option. We're going to put the S on our the, and we're going to put the E onto the adjective, or again, like we've seen, if we had multiple adjectives, they would all take E's. So we've looked at different types of sentence drills. We've practiced one specific formula for sentence drills. Now we can look at a whole exercise where we can take that one formula but set it up in a particular way that will allow you to rapid fire go through sentence drills even verbally, which is a very good idea. So how we set this up is that the vocabulary that you're working on, our basic fruits and vegetables here, is going to be in this column. The first column over here is this time just still our words der, die, das, right? These three different ways of saying the. Here we have all the adjectives, and then finally the verb, and then the adjective ist lecker. Okay, so we build sentences by jumping from one column to the next, to the next, to the next to create a complete sentence. In this middle column, we're going to have to add the appropriate declension every time. As we saw in the practice examples, it happens to be an E every time, regardless if our noun is masculine or feminine or neuter, right? We have the different declensions on the R for the masculine, the E for the feminine, and the S for the neuter nouns, but then when we add in that adjective, again, the declension will be the same for all of them. So then you practice saying sentences. You have to always pick out the noun first. You have to know where you're headed because of the declensions that you have to put on. So you have to first decide, okay, I'm going to talk about a banana. So I'm going to say, die große Banane ist lecker. Right? Then you say, all right, I'm going to talk about an Apfel. Der gelbe Apfel ist lecker. All right, now I'm going to talk about a Gürkchen. Das süße Gürkchen ist lecker. So on and so forth. So you can take this same setup and make it very complicated. You can do it in so many different ways, but a lot of those more advanced ways involve understanding the remaining three cases in German: the accusative, the dative, the genitive, these different roles that nouns can play. Because remember, this whole formula that we've been working on is just for the nominative case. It's just for subject nouns. In order to better understand those other cases in German, I have created a free mini course called Unlocking German Grammar. So to get started, click on the link below in the description. Then you'll see this page. Scroll down so you can click to start now. You'll enter in your email address and set up a password so that you can log into my free course and keep track of the progress that you're making, or even go through the contents a second time if you want to. Once you're inside the course, it looks like this. So of course, start with the welcome video. Then you can see here that we have 6 different lesson videos on nouns and slots, which we were just talking about with the nominative case. We talk about determiners, that's new, you need to know that. Adjectives, you've had a little bit of a preview of that. Noun roles, we're going to talk about not only the nominative case, but also the accusative and the dative. That relates then to the next video on cases. And then finally, an important video on word order. After that, next steps so that you can consider the options of continuing to study with me. And again, just like we've done in this YouTube video, there's lots of practice involved in this mini course. I'll walk you step by step through all sorts of examples, and this workbook is what you'll use as you go through those various lessons. I encourage you to sign up for Unlocking German Grammar right away, but then you can choose if you want to get started with the coursework right now, or if you want to stay here with me in this YouTube video first. The next thing that we're going to talk about is a whole bunch of misconceptions that learners frequently have about how exactly to learn German. Hallo Studentin, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and in this video we will address the question, is the instant immersion method the best way to learn German? This video is part of a larger series, Learning the German Language, the Essential Beginner's Guide. But this video does also stand on its own. So many students think that the best, fastest way to learn German would be to go to Germany and instantly hear only German and read only German and speak only German. Or if you can't actually travel right away, to duplicate this at home. Take an instant immersion course or class where all of the explanations even are in German, and you're listening to German music, and you're watching German shows, and you're reading German books. German. Does this really work? I want you to think about a child learning how to swim. Can we throw that child into the 10-foot and say, hey, learn how to swim, you can do it? Sure, we could. And maybe that poor child will flutter and sputter and flail around enough that they can keep their head above water. They can survive barely by the skin of their teeth. But what would be the better way to actually learn how to swim? You have to start off in the kiddie pool. You have to take some lessons. You have to learn some techniques. You have to have someone who shows you how to swim. And then you will be prepared to go out into the deep end and succeed at swimming instead of potentially drowning. I've known people who have gone to Germany not speaking a lick of German, and they didn't come out of it fluent in German. No, instead they ended that experience feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, and knowing a handful of broken German phrases. So what does it look like to start off in the kiddie pool and learn the essentials that then set us up for success here in the deep end? We have to hit 3 benchmarks. We need to learn the right thing at the right time and in the right way. There's this fancy phrase in the linguistics world that when you're learning German or any other language, you need to be focused on comprehensible input plus 1. But what this means is that the majority of the German that you're hearing or reading needs to be understandable to you, and you should be stretched just a little bit so that you're constantly improving. But if it's comprehensible input plus 10 or comprehensible input plus 100, that's too much. You're going to be flooded with all sorts of information that you don't have the tools to digest. When you first start off learning German in the kiddie pool, there are specific vocabulary words and specific grammar structures that you need to focus on first. You have to build the right foundation. This would include, for example, about 2,000 words of basic vocabulary. We'll look at the details in a second. Then, as far as grammar is concerned, you need to have a foundational understanding of the nominative, accusative, and dative cases. Again, examples coming soon. You need to learn the 3 most common verb tenses that you will use the most, and you also need to learn what is called the subjunctive mood. When it comes to the 2,000 word basic vocabulary, I want you to think of a pyramid. The foundation of it is going to be a bunch of basic noun categories such as clothing, foods, furniture, professions, places, etc. After that, we have a bunch of verbs that we need to work on. About 50 common verbs, and you need to think in terms of learning the verb to eat, but saving verbs such as to nibble, to snack, to munch, etc. for down the road. Okay, but then you also need to learn what are called modal verbs and verbs with separable prefixes. Then after that, we need to add in a few dozen basic adjectives and then a handful of other types of words, adverbs and prepositions. In order to become proficient or even fluent in German, you have to, from the very beginning, start understanding the German system for indicating who's the subject of the sentence, who's the direct object of the sentence, who's the indirect object of the sentence. For example, to say, der Mann backt, the man bakes. He's the subject of the sentence. That means he's in the nominative case. In this next example, he's still the subject, still in the nominative case, but now we're talking about what he's baking. And that what, a cake, is the direct object, which in German goes into the accusative case. In this third example, der Mann backt seine Frau einen Kuchen, our man is still the subject, still in the nominative case. The cake is still what he's baking, so it's still in the accusative case. And the person for whom the cake is being baked his wife, is in the dative case because she's the indirect object in this sentence. And I know that this is super overwhelming, okay? I have a free mini course called Unlocking German Grammar. You can click on the link down below, open that up in a new tab, and register for that course today so that you can start better understanding what on earth I was just talking about here. But in this video, suffice it to say, you need to learn this stuff. Okay, so we need to work on a basic vocabulary of 2,000 words. We need to learn the nominative, accusative, and dative cases. We also need to learn the 3 most basic verb tenses that you're going to use the most. The first is the present tense, as in der Mann backt, the man bakes. Second is the past tense, der Mann backte, the man baked. Third is another past tense that German uses even more often, der Mann hat gebacken, which is essentially another way of saying the man baked. The fourth and final element of kiddie pool German that you need to build first is working on what is called the subjunctive mood. And that would mean, for example, knowing how to say der Mann würde backen, the man would bake if ... or der Mann hätte gebacken wenn, the man would have baked if, or saying der Mann wäre Bäcker wenn, the man would be a baker if. Once you build up these basic techniques in the kiddie pool, then you are ready to head out into the deep end and experience full immersion of taking in the German left and right, speaking only in German, asking questions when you don't understand something, building vocabulary like a madman every day. You're ready for that when you have the foundation first. Instant immersion is a recipe for drowning. But full immersion, right? The right thing at the right time, done in the right way because you have the kiddie pool foundation, is fantastic. But be sure to follow my advice of the vocabulary and those specific grammar points in the kiddie pool so you can be set up for success in the deep end. All the misinformation on the instant immersion method ties hand in hand with another prevalent belief, which is if you want to speak German, the best way to get started is to simply start speaking German. Does this really work? We're going to look at that in the next video. Hallo Studentin, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and in this video we want to answer the question, how soon am I ready to have a conversation in German? This video is part of a larger series, Learning the German Language, the Essential Beginner's Guide, but this video does also stand on its own. There's a massive misconception out there that if you want to learn to speak German, the best way to get started is to simply start speaking. This idea is very much so connected to the other misconception that we've talked about already, that the instant immersion approach is the best way to learn German. But just like we saw in the video on that misconception, giving students the advice to simply start speaking German from the very beginning is like throwing someone who can't swim into the deep end and saying, good luck, you'll figure it out. Are there people who flap and flail around enough that they keep their heads above water, maybe even get to that point that they do on their own figure out certain swimming techniques? I suppose so, but in my book, this is going about learning to speak German the hard way. The most efficient and effective way to learn to speak German is to not throw yourself into it and try to figure it out as you go along, but start at the beginning in the kiddie pool and have a step-by-step process, a system for getting yourself to that place that you can successfully swim in the deep end. You do want to start speaking German from the very beginning, but there's a massive qualifier to that statement. Okay, there are two different types of speech, what I call scripted speech and created speech. Created speech is the jumping into the deep end before you know how to swim. This is where you're thinking up your own sentences of how to introduce yourself and talk about your hobbies, etc., etc. Scripted speech, on the other hand, is already written for you. This is like taking a German song that you really like, finding the lyrics and singing along to it, or finding an easy beginner German reader, getting the book, also getting the audiobook, and then reading it aloud along with the audiobook version, okay? It's scripted because everything's taken care of for you. You don't have to worry about vocabulary that you don't yet know. You don't have to worry about grammar structures that you don't yet know. It's all done for you, which frees you up to focus on getting your body used to making new German sounds. There are letters of the alphabet, like the umlauted A, O, and U, that make sounds we're not used to in English, okay? You need to practice these, and you need to practice overall inflection so that you're not speaking in a really choppy, hesitant way. You also want to develop as authentic of an accent as possible, right? You don't want to sound like this. Hallo, ich bin Laura, ich komme aus Iowa, ich spreche seit 10 Jahren Deutsch. Right? You want to sound like a German. Hallo, ich bin Laura, ich komme aus Iowa, ich spreche seit 10 Jahren Deutsch. Yeah, big difference, okay? You can get there, but starting with scripted speech is key. You need to hear lots of authentic German and practice matching it long before you are ready to start making your own German utterances, okay? There's a step-by-step process for you here. All right, so as already mentioned, you start with something such as listening to music. Then that's going to lead you to the place that after building basic vocabulary, learning essential grammar structures, you put that into practice by creating your own sentence drills. This is a written exercise, okay, where you get to practice utilizing new vocabulary and the grammar that helps you string it all together. But after you write these sentence drills, you can also read them aloud and get more scripted speech practice. Okay, from there, you would further expand into writing entire dialogues, right? You imagine yourself in a situation at the grocery store, at the bank, at the post office, and write out, again, written exercise, write out, what would you say? What might someone else say to you? Then what would you say, right? You play act essentially through these scenarios, and that will help you recognize where you might still have some holes in your basic knowledge, where there are some new vocabulary words that you still need to learn, or basic grammar structures that you still need to learn. Okay, from there, because again, you can read these dialogues aloud, and that's more scripted speech practice. After you have some of this under your belt, the next step is to find at least one native speaker, ideally, who also is a good teacher. It's not enough to just be a native speaker. You have to find someone who will correct you when you make mistakes, right? Every time you make a mistake, because that's what you need. Someone who will correct you and who can also explain why something is the way it is. That's the ideal scenario. With this person, then, you can start having targeted conversations. You can start with a mix of the scripted and created speech. You can prepare a topic, right? That brings us back to the idea of dialogues. You can prepare a topic in written form, but then have the conversation where you're not reading from the dialogue, you're just trying to draw upon that practice in order to be more successful in that conversation. After you get some practice with that trusted teacher, that trusted guide who is further honing your skills, then you are ready for going out into the wild and having as many conversations as you possibly can, because at this point, you've built up a certain amount of comfort, a certain amount of confidence, because you've gone through a step-by-step process that is systematically preparing you to create your own German utterances. So at this point, I can hear you ask the question, how long? How long will this process take? That is the subject of our next video. How fast can I learn to speak German? Hallo Studentin, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and in this video we want to look at the question, how fast can I learn the German language? This video is part of a larger series, Learning the German Language, the Essential Beginner's Guide, but this video does also stand on its own. Before we can answer that question, we have to first look at a related question, which is, what does it mean to speak German? Or what does it mean to be proficient or even fluent in German? And there are a lot of misconceptions around this topic. The first thing that you need to understand is that there are two types of vocabulary. I want you to picture with me an iceberg. Only a little bit of the iceberg is above the surface of the water, and the majority of it is underneath the surface. That part of the iceberg is passive vocabulary, and above the surface of the water is active vocabulary. What this means is that you will understand a lot more vocabulary than you use. And this will also be true as you learn to speak German. So not only should you reasonably expect that you will understand a lot more German than you actually use yourself in writing or in speaking, but this gets even better yet because the definitions of fluency in a foreign language are that even when you have a third of the vocabulary of a native speaker, you're still considered fluent, right? So basically, your iceberg is a third of the size of a native speaker's, and yet that's still considered fluent. Another concept that's very important to keep in mind as you're building your German iceberg of vocabulary is that just like you're never going to know all the words that exist in the English language, you're never going to know all of the words that exist in German either, neither do native German speakers, and you need to be really focused on the vocabulary that you're actually going to use. If you are a professor and you give all sorts of academic talks, you're going to have to know very specialized vocabulary. If you are a car mechanic, that's other specialized vocabulary. If you are a doctor, a musician, a lawyer, and you want to be able to talk about those same things in German, that's a lot of very specialized vocabulary. But we don't have to learn all of those words if they don't apply to us. So it's really important in this larger conversation of how fast can I learn to speak German that you think about the life that you lead, the words that you use in English, the topics that you talk about in English, and make sure that you are focusing your time on learning those same words in German. Now, in previous videos on other misconceptions about how to learn German, we've talked about how it's actually really inefficient and ineffective to throw yourself into the deep end and try to figure out the German language as you go along, that you'll actually save yourself a lot of time, not to mention frustration, if you appropriately start off in the kiddie pool and step by step gradually build up to being out in the deep end. And that important truth ties us into the very common misconception that adults learn more slowly than children, that it's going to take adults longer to learn a foreign language than a child would do it. And studies have actually shown that when you look at the number of hours put into learning a language, adults can learn infinitely faster than children can. And that's partly because children, in a way, have no choice but to be thrown into the deep end and learn how to sink or swim. And adults, in contrast, we can take this very analytical approach. We can have a step-by-step technical process for learning language, which is much, much faster. We had to do the deep end approach when we were learning our native language. That's what everyone has to do. But since we have our native language under our belts, we can now apply our understanding of grammar structures and just our vocabulary that we already have. We can use all of that to our advantage to learn German much, much faster than a child can. So now, to really black and white answer this question, how long is it going to take? How quickly can I be fluent in German? Of course, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer, but I can say that it's all about how you go about it. If you know how to intentionally practice, if you make sure that you're in the zone of high efficiency applied learning, which we talked about earlier in this series, you will learn the fastest possible. And it could take you a matter of months, maybe even weeks. It's about how many hours you can put in a given day, in a given week. But if you do it right, it doesn't have to take you years before you're having those desired conversations in German. So now there are 4 key impediments to learning German as quickly as possible. We've talked about 2 of them already in previous videos, and those are the misconceptions that using the instant immersion method is a good idea, and that speaking right away, creating your own German utterances right from the beginning is an efficient process. It's not. So now we have 2 final impediments or hindrances that we need to be aware of so we can avoid them so that you can learn to speak German as quickly as possible. In the next video, we're going to look at the question, when is it appropriate to translate and when not? When is it going to help you and when is it getting in the way? Hallo Studentin, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and in this video we want to look at the question, is translating good or bad? This video is part of a larger series, Learning the German Language, the Essential Beginner's Guide, but this video does also stand on its own. In order to answer this question, I need you to look at this language triangle with me, okay? The top of the triangle is our goal, learning German words, okay? There are 2 types of vocabulary that we need to build and 2 different ways of building it. The first type is concrete vocabulary, which is anything that we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. This vocabulary we can build by connecting directly from the concept of what that thing is to the German word. For example, we can see a picture of something like this, and we can directly associate that with the German Die Blume. Okay, that's what this is, Die Blume. Okay, that's how we build all concrete vocabulary. Foods, furniture, clothing, places, anything that you can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, you should be learning this way, right? By connecting directly from the concept to the German. That's going to be the fast way to learn German, and that's the only way that true fluency in German is possible. You don't have time in a conversation to translate every word in your head, okay? You don't want to do that, and if you follow this process, right, of this particular way of building concrete vocabulary in German, you won't get stuck in that trap. You'll be able to think quickly in German and find all the words that you need. Okay, but there's a second type of vocabulary, which is the opposite of concrete vocabulary, and that is abstract. Okay, these are words such as freedom, friendship, kindness, economics, right? We don't have a way to touch economics. We can't smell freedom. We can't taste friendship, right? These are abstract nouns, and we have to learn these differently. This is where translation does come into play. You have no choice but to translate from English or whatever your native language is into German. So it's a long way because we're essentially going from the concept through our native tongue and then translating into German. So when you initially learn an abstract word, you have to do this. But we need to get away from translating as soon as possible. And the way that we can do that is by taking all of those new words, freedom, kindness, friendship, whatever it is, and immediately applying them into sentence drills, which I talk about earlier in this series. You have to use the vocabulary in an applied way right away. And if you do that, you'll be able to get away from the perpetual translation of those words, and you will still internalize the German, right, subconsciously, and be able to draw upon that rapidly, just like a native speaker. So translation isn't inherently good or bad. It can be the right thing if it's the right time and it's used in the right way. So now we have one final misconception that we need to correct so that you can be well on your way to learning German as efficiently and effectively as possible. In the next video, we're going to look at the question, is learning German all a matter of building as much vocabulary as possible, or is there something else to it? Hallo Studentin, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and in this video we want to address the misconception that learning to speak the German language is a simple matter of building vocabulary, that whatever you want to say, you take that English word, you learn the German equivalent, you string them all together like we would in English, but now, presto changeo, you're speaking German. This video is part of my larger series, Learning the German Language, The Essential Beginner's Guide, but this video does also stand on its own. There are two sides to learning German or any other language. You have to learn vocabulary words, but then you also have to learn the grammar rules, which allow you to correctly string those vocabulary words together and say something. You're speaking German in this place where vocabulary and grammar overlap. One on their own without the other is not enough. There are so many students who think that they have to build at least some vocabulary first before they start learning any grammar at all. And this is the exact opposite of the truth, which is you actually need to start with grammar. It's so tempting to think, okay, I'll just build up some basic vocabulary. I'll learn Tisch, for table, couch, obvious, kissen, which means pillow. I'll just learn some stuff like that. Then I'll work on the grammar so that I can say, the table is brown and the couch is blue and the pillow is green. But I'll learn some of the vocab first. That'll be better. No, because in German, even when you're just learning some basic nouns like this, whether it's furniture or clothing or foods or plants or what have you, you already have to learn some grammar encoded along with them, because you have to know the gender of every noun in German when you learn it. You have to know that it's not just Tisch, it's der Tisch. This is a masculine noun. Der. You have to know that couch is a feminine noun. It is die Couch. You have to know that Kissen is a neuter noun, that it is das Kissen. The very first thing that you should learn before you start learning any vocabulary is you should study noun endings and noun groups. Noun endings are particular ways that nouns are spelled in German that are associated clearly with one gender over the others. So for example, anytime that you see the ending ling on a German word, you can know that that word is a masculine noun. It's going to have a der in front of it. Der Feigling, der Lehrling, etc. Then, so likewise, if you see the ending kite, you can know automatically that whatever word is ending with kite is a feminine noun, okay? Freundlichkeit, for example, friendliness. That's a feminine noun because it ends with kite, so it has to have a D in front of it, die Freundlichkeit. All right, then finally, so likewise, there are lots of neuter endings. For example, ment. Okay, so das Experiment, das Instrument. Okay, nouns that end with ment are, as a rule, neuter nouns. And learning all of these endings saves you so much time. It's unbelievable. For example, just going back to the kite here, if you remember that the kite ending is feminine, then you will automatically know the gender of literally hundreds of nouns. So now it's also really powerful to learn noun groups and their associations with one gender over the other two. For example, weather elements, as a rule, are masculine nouns. Whether you're saying der Wind for wind, der Frost, frost, der Hagel for hail, okay? Weather elements are usually masculine nouns, okay? Trees, fruits, and flowers are usually feminine nouns, okay? And then an example of neuter nouns would be the elements of the periodic table, okay? So various chemicals and minerals and stuff like that are usually neuter nouns. So if you're first armed with this information on noun endings and noun groups, and then you start building up some basic vocabulary, you will immediately be able to practice solidifying the information on the different noun endings and the noun groups when you learn those words. You'll learn the why behind them. You won't just learn der, die, das in front of the noun. You'll learn that, sure, but then you'll be able to say, oh yes, and it's a masculine noun, it's der, whatever, because of its ending, or it's der because it belongs to a particular group, so on and so forth. And when you know that why, that sticks in your brain so much better. Der, die, das is not just random. There are patterns, there are principles, and you need to know those before you waste any time trying to learn vocabulary without them, trying to learn just that random der, die, das, which is really hard for our brains to hold on to. So now I have a whole German grammar course called German Foundations, which is full of all of the essential grammar topics that I believe you should study first before you start building vocabulary, so that you are well prepared with the necessary grammar to then use that vocabulary right away, which again, we've talked about this earlier in this series, that whole concept of sentence drills. Okay, so you can sign up for that, of course, but there's actually one step earlier than my German Foundations course, and that is a free mini course that I've put together for you called Unlocking German Grammar. You really should start there. It'll help you fully reap all of the benefits of German Foundations if you do. So if you haven't already, click the link in the description below and sign up for Unlocking German Grammar right now and get started with that free material. Thank you for learning German here with me on YouTube. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you in my course Unlocking German Grammar next.